Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, March already? No, February 5th, 2025. And today on the Roundup, we're going to be answering three questions we've been hearing from international educators over the past 7 days. And as we do each week on the Roundup, this is our 306th edition of the Midweek Roundup. So grateful to be coming into your homes, into your offices, into your ears every week as part of your international edification. This is a real labor of love for me in terms of what the Roundup and the newsletter that we also do at SMIE Consulting has produced for our international ed friends around the world. But it is a labor of love because I know how busy you get. I work on campus too. I'm working at the University of Akron, where I just started my position as Director of International Recruitment and Engagement. So I know what it's like. I've been in your shoes. I've been on campus. I am on campus, and we get so focused on our job sometimes we don't have time enough in our days to process everything that's going on around us. So that's what the Roundup is here to do, to give you a half an hour to kind of get some next level thoughts in terms of how U.S. institutions can and should be preparing changes to their strategic international enrollment strategies, as well as understanding what's going on in the wider world of international education and where there may be opportunities for us to change and improve some of what we do. So as we do each week, the questions that we ask here on Wednesday afternoons come from news stories we see in our newsletter that we produce that comes out Monday mornings. Each week at 9 a.m. Eastern, you can get an email version of it. And I've dropped the link to our website at smieconsulting.org/subscribe. I'm also going to drop in that's the subscribe page. I'm also dropping in the email version of this week's edition so that you have that for reference as we go through the three questions today. So as we take the themes that we see developing in the newsletter each Monday and identify the kinds of questions we want to talk about here on Wednesday in depth. And as we do what you see in the newsletter on Monday are our hot takes on whatever that news story is about, or what this may or may not mean for us, been positively or negatively. There's a healthy dose of sarcasm in a number of my posts, so please get used to that. But in addition to the newsletter version, there's also a LinkedIn version that is available. You can drop that in the chat as well. And that, between the two of them, that comes out about a half hour earlier than the email version on Monday mornings. Between the two of them, we have well over 2,350 subscribers. So very excited about so many international educators getting some of their international ed news from us each week. So what we try and do here on Wednesdays is go into a bit more depth, 10 minutes or so on each of the three questions, and have it available in terms of where we see some of the impacts of these news stories and what we do. So let's get right to the first one. And that is, does TikTok have a future in the U.S. after April 20th, or whatever the 75-day or 90-day extended period that President Trump made during his executive order signing on his first day in office on January 20th. So first thing I had heard was 90 days. So 3 months out would be April 20th. So what is the future of TikTok in the U.S. After April 20th? Basically, the president was given the ability to extend the deadline, which, as those that remember or who have been on the platform, or some who are addicted to the platform or use it for business or recruitment, on the January 19th, TikTok went down in the United States. It was no longer available for downloads. Servers were not connected until it leaked that President Trump was going to, on the next day after he was inaugurated, extend the final decision on TikTok's future 3 months out from the election, from the inauguration. So what that future was basically doing is giving time for a U.S. buyer to get approval from ByteDance, the parent company, and really, in effect, President Xi of China, since it's a Chinese company and must bend its will to the rule of the president, or of the party. President Xi has a final vote, veto, if you will. If he doesn't like a deal that's proposed, he can say no, and it doesn't happen, regardless of whether the owners of the company want to go through with it or not. So, welcome to communist China. So, in terms of the future, is ultimately, even if a buyer is found and an agreement is made with ByteDance, unless President Xi signs off on it, it won't happen. So the Inside Higher Ed article that I posted and to ask the question, what's going to happen to colleges, U.S. colleges, once if TikTok does go dark? We see that 47% of college students are using TikTok on a daily basis. This means that of the millions of Americans who are using it for business, there are challenges that are going to be, if it does go dark and a buyer is not found, there will be legal challenges. TikTok will fight to stay on U.S. servers, and there will be injunctions until it gets heard all the way up to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court has already said that they would, in fact, they upheld the ban that Congress passed on TikTok that was to go into effect January 19th, which did. So Supreme Court has already said that that was a legal ban. So what would make it any difference? There would have to be either legislation passed or overturned in the courts. So but that doesn't look likely with the current makeup of the court. So it'll be interesting, but in higher ed specifically, it has become a space for student expression, activism, and social engagement, according to this article. It's also become a place to research AI literacy, a place of research and AI literacy. The use of TikTok as a search engine by prospective students. We've seen stories like that over the years as well. So that is a bit of a challenge. Do you think there's justification for the ban? The article is asking questions of the subject of the article or the person here, and it's a First Amendment lawyer, J. Israel Balderas, and a journalism professor. Who shares his thoughts. In terms of the cultural consequences, quite significant. Justification for a ban in terms of the national security concerns, in terms of TikTok, ByteDance, the parent company, sharing any user data, U.S. user data with the Chinese Communist Party. They legally have to do that, but are they able to? There's all sorts of questions on that. And the enforceability of the bans, what college students might do to get around it. Getting VPNs so that they can mask themselves to be in a different country that does allow it. That's probably likely. So the TikTok bans on digital literacy efforts in the age of AI might be affected. So obviously TikTok is in a geopolitical crossfire. That's one of the questions that was asked. And having these conversations is really indicative of the very tense political climate we live in. But the one thing that there's been these rushes to other platforms if TikTok was to go away, and RedNote, one of the other Chinese apps, short-form video apps that has popped up, was getting a lot of traction. It's not nearly the 170 million that TikTok has in the U.S., but certainly significant numbers there. The folks at Sunrise have done an actual presentation about that. Will RedNote be the next TikTok? And why should universities care? So it's a longer session, but certainly worth checking out. Just another article about, well, is RedNote actually all that in a bag of chips? And most early users are saying no. The censorship laws, because it is based in China and there aren't U.S. servers to be basically pushing that aren't subject to Chinese censorship requirements. You see certain keywords about Tiananmen Square, about Uyghur Muslims, about freedom of Tibet or Tibet separation. None of that's really ever allowed, and certainly that is something that censorship would rear its ugly head very quickly for new users expecting the same thing that they're able to do on TikTok. Certainly a lot of the content you put on TikTok here in the US you'd never see in China anyway. It's a totally different beast. So TikTok's future isn't great if a deal can't be found for a U.S. buyer that ultimately would get signed off on by Xi. So this will be one of the big early tests for the relationship between Trump and Xi and the relationship between the U.S. and China as a result. And if and when this deal does happen, if it happens and TikTok stays and we have a U.S. buyer, I think there's certainly a much brighter outlook for what's going to happen with China in the months ahead and the years ahead. So let's be thinking positively about that. Now, next question of the day, and that circles around an article that came out in University World News. ICEF Monitor. And are we talking about that one? No, we're talking about this. My apologies. So it's a University World News article coming out of Vietnam, but about the worldwide industry of educational agents. So the question we're asking ourselves is, what role are agents playing globally? Now, we have a good idea in the United States how significant agents have become on the list of things that universities are using to recruit international students from around the world. And what we see here in this University World News article about this an ICEF survey that there are now 22,000 agencies operating globally in terms of working with students who are looking to go abroad for various levels of education. So not just higher ed, it could be English language, vocational, all of that. So about 22,000 agents. And at one point, I think one of my previous institutions worked with nearly a third of those. So very scary numbers there, obviously. That's globally, and certain countries have quite a bit more than others, India, China, others, but they have varying levels of approvals or recognitions, training, certifications, all of that. Not all of those 22,000 would be considered above that, and it would be eligible to work with you. They may have certain countries that they only work with. They may not be approved to work with colleges in all countries. So there's definitely some of that is a fluff or necessarily not applicable to you directly. That's globally. So again, having that global perspective, what's going on in the world, 22,000 agencies. In the U.S., we're generally told that up to half of U.S. colleges are now working with agents actively in their student recruitment process. About 10 years ago, it was about a third to a 30% to a third, but now we're well over, I think, 50% and growing. Just to give some perspective, in the UK, it's about half of universities are using agents. In Australia, 86%, because that's really where the concept of agents first began with IDP in 1986 or so. First educational agency recruiting for Australian institutions, and IDP has obviously since expanded significantly. So there are numerous countries that have certifications. The British Council does certification for British UK universities for agents. There's AIRC in the United States. There's ICEF that does agency training globally and recognition globally. So all of these things are out there in the wider world, but it is a very diverse world out there. And I think that's some of the context, that understanding what's happening in various countries will impact the likelihood that you'll be having to work with agents as part of any recruitment strategies you might have in key markets. So good article, kind of painting the broader picture, but now understanding kind of how significant agents are becoming in the global educational landscape. So that's enough on that second question. We're going to spend the last half of this call talking, this roundup, talking about what may well be the future of internationalization on the global landscape. And that is around T&E. And those not familiar with what that is, that means transnational education. In the United States, we are rookies, really, when it comes to doing T&E well. There are certain universities that have got a lock on how to do T&E. You see NYU with its campuses in Shanghai and Abu Dhabi that have gotten international fame. You've seen Duke Kunshan open in China. You've seen Doha have Education City since probably the mid-noughties, when that town city took off to bring in U.S. institutions and other countries' prime institutions to set up programs of some of their programs in universities location in Doha. What you saw at Texas A&M, you've seen Carnegie Mellon, you've seen Georgetown's SIS, and other universities of ECU that have had physical locations in another country. That's one form of T&E. There's several forms. There's kind of a campus-based approach. There is campus within a campus approach where you're basically renting space in another institution's facilities to deliver programs. And then there is a hybrid or online version of T&E. So that is what, those are the kinds of versions that you see in the wider world. But in the U.S., we're very much rookies on this level with regards to physical campuses overseas. The leaders in T&E are going to be the British. We've seen them do that successfully for a number of years, and I think 2 years ago there were more degrees issued to British university degrees issued to students outside of England or the British Isles as there were inside. So more students globally were getting degrees from British universities who were studying physically outside the British Isles. So we now see an article this past week that suggests that in the next year or two, you will see more students getting enrolled in courses outside the UK than inside the UK in British education systems. So there's a lot at stake in T&E in terms of the numbers, and that for the UK, that's bordering 500. There's over 500,000 students taking T&E degrees outside of England, outside of the UK. But you also have other countries that are really emphasizing T&E in their new national education policies, and India has expressed interest in that in terms of having U.S. Or other top 200 ranked schools set up campuses, or top 100 ranked programs set up shop in India. There are also you see in China, they have released their new 10-year plan for higher education. It's an updated policy. An interpretation of what those policies are was released by my colleague Charles Sun, based in China, and very tapped into the T&E movement there. And he's releasing details of the 2024-2035 master plan on building China into a leading nation in education. So China likes to set audacious goals for its higher ed. They've had, as part of their Belt and Road Initiative, they included educational initiatives in South Asia, in Africa, other parts of the world, to bring students to China for university studies. They've had relationships building with educational institutions in their BRI countries. They've funded scholarships to come to China. They've made pathways easier to bring top talent into their country to study at their university, to understand Chinese culture and the system and the country and the education, all of that. You've seen countries like the Philippines also make some significant waves with their international ed policies, that they are actively incentivizing building foreign higher education campuses. So they really are eager to draw in institutions that want to tap into the Philippine market, and there's certainly good reason to do that. Philippines is really on the radar, growing list of countries that are expanding T&E and inviting institutions to come and set up at least partial campuses through top-ranked programs in their countries. So you see the Philippines, you see China, you see the United Arab Emirates. They have had education or knowledge city in Dubai for a number of years, and with relative success, not a whole lot of fanfare, but they're really looking to ramp up their T&E as well by attracting institutions to set up. They're looking by 2040, so another 15 years, to set up 15 more branch campuses to meet the growing demand for higher education in the United Arab Emirates. So those are significant numbers of campuses. Philippines haven't put a real number on it, but they are looking at models that would be 60-40% ownership in favor of the Philippine partner. They're looking for tax breaks to bring them in, doing all sorts of things. So we'll see what that actually looks like and who some of the takers might be. You might see Australia, you might see New Zealand, you might see China try to set up shop in the Philippines. We'll see. They're looking to deepen their claws in a lot of different areas. But the granddaddy of them all, as I mentioned, is the UK, and I'll drop the link to that article that shared the numbers of international students getting British education outside of the UK, and give you a sense of what that volume looks like. So there's a lot going on in international higher education these days. We know all the executive orders are front and center for a lot of folks on campus. There's going to be a lot more to come. We're in that 6-day window that Trump gave on one of his executive orders on extreme vetting, and see if any other countries out in the wider world need to have restricted or banned visa issuance from those countries. So those are significant challenges that have yet to make themselves fully clear. We won't know, but if the indications around deportation of criminal migrants that have been sent back to their home countries. So you saw the negotiations going on with the Colombian president that tariffs were threatened. Then the Colombian president backed down and took the Colombian deportees. So is that kind of a strategy going to work? The negotiations between Mexico and with Mexico and with Canada separately on tariff imposition, and then once those tariffs are actually imposed, then the Canadian Prime Minister comes to the table, gets a 30-day reprieve. The Mexican president does the same thing; she gets a 30-day reprieve. So these are things that are negotiating tactics that you can expect on everything the Trump administration does. So if in 60 days or less we find out that there's a handful of countries that are on a list that clearly don't provide the level of vetting allow us access to national databases to check in those countries that these potential visitors would be coming from, if we don't have access to the same level security clearance criminal databases of visa applicants to our country from a host country or the sending country, then that could mean bans going in place for any travel from that country to us. And they'll be back and forth. There'll be negotiations between the Trump administration and the government of the affected countries, and we'll see what happens. But everything's a negotiation for Trump. He's made that very clear from the start. He'll come out strong, put a firm stake in the ground, and he'll say this is what needs to happen. If it doesn't happen, then the whip comes down and either brings the party to the table or they suffer the consequences. It's a pretty brutal way of conducting diplomacy, but is it effective? We'll see in the long term, but it certainly does not ease tensions. It ruffles feathers. It hurts feelings, if that matters, in diplomacy, but certainly there are many things that are yet to happen that we don't fully comprehend what they are, and they're going about it in a more circumspect way, kind of the blitzkrieg approach with the executive orders, but putting in these review periods, these bans, these temporary halts, all of these things on. Obviously, any one of us in international education is dismayed by what's happening with the USAID and friends and colleagues who've worked for them over the years, who are overseas or been recalled. Everything's being vetted, and on this DOGE attempt to eliminate waste, and there is certainly waste in USAID budgets in terms of corruption by the misuse in country when it's awarded for projects that don't make a whole lot of sense in terms of U.S. values and use of funds, proper uses of funds. So some of the projects you hear of being approved, those are areas of concern. That's why the government's making that review. But what we forget is the lives that are being impacted by all this disruption, and that's it's causing a lot of agita amongst federal government employees who have to report back to work physically in person work or lose their jobs. There's a lot of change, and no one likes change much. It's not all of it's good. There's a lot of it that's driving certainly international educators crazy because we don't know the specifics. We feel like we're under threat again, but the reality is we don't. All we can do is advocate for our students most first and foremost, but also for our jobs. These students being here supports institutions' ability to hire us and provide services to these students so that they have positive impressions of the United States and can become either future employees of companies in this country through OPT and potentially H-1B, or return home with positive experiences in the United States. So within the United States, our future, yes, we have the most capacity. We don't have the issues that Canada, UK, Australia have in terms of capacity, in terms of strains on services. We're not at that point because they're such a small percentage comparatively of our overall higher ed capacity. We're at 5%, 6%. Australia, Canada, UK are 25, 30, 35% or more at certain institutions. So our internationalization future might not be solely TNE. I think there's still huge value in having the students come to us for their experiences, and the greater majority always will. Are we going to ever have 1 million students doing US TNE outside our borders? That would be incredible if it ever did happen, but we're a long, long, long way off that. And certainly for us, our focus needs to be providing options. To be frank, we need to be more globally competitive, and part of that is having a variety of ways that students can do your degrees rather than just only coming for us, whether that's 3+2s for combined bachelor's masters, whether that's 2+2s, whether that's 3+1s for bachelor's degree completion, where you're doing some of the first 3 years online, in person, online or hybrid with the students in their home countries, and then they come to you for the final year. Variety of different ways you can do that, and then other than having a physical campus overseas. So we'll see what happens, but there's certainly many more unanswered questions than answered at this point. But what we can do is breathe, take a step back, and advocate for our students through our government affairs officers on campus so that they're aware of the issues that are going to impact our students, and also through our professional organizations, NAFSA, Alliance for International Exchange, President's Alliance, as well as U.S. for Success Coalition. So advocating with our representative bodies to let them know, hey, go fight the fight. That's what you're there for, and they do, and they do it. They know who to talk to and how to message appropriately, but are certainly always willing to get feedback from their members. So please do take advantage of those opportunities. That's all we have for you this week on the Midweek Roundup. I want to thank you all for joining us. And again, this is available on demand on our YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, not Twitter, but YouTube and Facebook pages. Do encourage you, if you're an audio-only fanatic, you can certainly get the audio-only podcast version of the Roundup, which has now over 4,100 downloads and into our 6th year, and it's over 6 years now, into our 7th year beginning of podcasts coming your way. So thanks again for being a